All right. To summarize, perhaps the main point of what we've been learning here in this kuntrus, which is called Hamavarich Tzarch Sheyitom, we have what seems at the surface of it to be a stira, a contradiction between two Rashis. Rashi, on the one hand, in Masechta Eruvin, which you'll see on page Yud, on Daf Memamid Beis, in the sugya of a bris milah on Yom Kippur, and the Gemara says that if we'll recite Shechiyanu on a kos shel yayin, we'll give the yayin to the tinok, to the anuka. Rashi says that the halacha of hamavarach tzarch sheyitom lav dafka hamavarach. The mavarach doesn't have to drink the wine. And he says that Taima, the reason why we're drinking the wine is because Gnayihu l'kos shel bracha shelo yehena adam imenu liachar shetei berachas hayayin debar priagafen bracha shelo litzarach. So you get the impression here, it's almost black and white, that hamavarach tzar sheyitom, according to Rashi, is just a side issue of making the bracha of bar priagafen more meaningful to the spectator by guaranteeing that somebody, at least somebody, even the Yinuka, will benefit from the yayin. But it's certainly not essential to the bracha itself. And we contrast that with Rashi in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, which you'll see here on page Tes Zayin, on Chav Tes Amid Beis, where Rashi considers that the bracha of Bar Pri Hagafen is part of the Birchas HaChova, in which case Kiddush is comprised of two different essential brachas, one of which is Bar Pri Hagafen, and the second of which is Mekadesh HaShabbos. And then Afkamina Rashi says is that the Mekadesh could recite the bracha, but it's considered as if everyone at the table who wants to be Yotzei the mitzvah of Kiddush recited the bracha. And therefore, although in Birchas Hanenim, the rule is that unless you have Hana, you can't be Motzi someone else with the Birchas Hanenim. It's only if you have two people, both of whom are Nene, then one could recite the bracha on behalf of the other. But Rashi upgrades the bracha of Bar Pri Hagafen in Kiddush to a Birchas HaMitzvah. And here we'll see, this is where we left off last time, on page Yud Zayin, and he quotes the Achronim, who make a fundamental distinction between the two Rashis. Each sugya and each Rashi is addressing a different subject. Whereas the Rashi in Masechta Eruvin is addressing the concept called Kos Shel Bracha, which is a general concept that is derived from the principle, as we mentioned over and over again, of Ein Shira El Hayayin. And in that context, we should understand the Rashi of Gnaihu L'Kos Shelo Yene Mimenu, as opposed to the Rashi in Rosh Hashanah, the subject of which is Kiddush. And we must accept a fundamental distinction between Kiddush and other Kosel Shel Bracha. And the basis for this, and the background for this, is the Gemara Psachim that we began with. Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, Zochreu Al Hayayin, which means that the yayin itself is part and parcel of the mitzvah of Zechira. Let it be Doraisa, let it be D'Rabbanan. Doraisa, according to, as we mentioned, the whole school of Rishonim, including the Mefarish and Nazir and so forth and so on, let it be D'Rabbanan according to the Balei HaTosfos and Rabbeinu Tam. Then you read the Gemara Nazir with a bitmiyah, with a question mark. But either way, even if I grant you that Shtiyas HaYayin in Kiddush is only D'Rabbanan, what the Rabbanan did was they integrated the Shtiyas HaYayin into the very fabric and the very essence of the mitzvah Kiddush. And this goes as far as the Gaonim, who say that if the Makadesh does not drink from the kos, then lo yotzi yedei Kiddush. The Shtiyah becomes essential to the kos. And the mitzvah of Kiddush now is comprised of two different parts. Number one, reciting the brachos, and number two, the Shtiyas HaYayin. If we understand Rashi and Masechta Rosh Hashanah in that context, then Rashi is elevating the status of Borei Pri HaGofen to that of a Birchas HaMitzvah. It's part and parcel and essential to the mitzvah of Kiddush. So the mitzvah of Kiddush is not fulfilled through the bracha of Kiddush alone, meaning Mekadesh HaShabbos, but through the combination of the Birchas Borei Pri HaGofen together with the Kiddush. And they are integrated into one entity. Both brachos are critical, and the Shtiyah is the second part of that mitzvah. So that now Borei Pri HaGofen is no longer a Birchas HaNenim. As a Birchas HaNenim, Rashi has emphasized in Masechta Eruvin that somebody has to be Nenim from the Kos. Doesn't have to be the Mevarech. It doesn't have to be someone who's chayiv in the mitzvah. It could be a katan, it could be a yenuka. Because the bracha is only there as a kiyum of shevach v'odaya of shir alakos. Once you recite the shevach v'odaya, which is Borei Pri HaGofen, then you fulfill the mitzvah. The Shtiyah is something extraneous. We'll only require it because we're worried about the onlooker who thinks that you recited a Birchas HaNenim and nobody was Nenim from the Kos. It was there for Bracha L'Shav. And this is the fundamental distinction that he has here in the name of the Achronim. And he points out that if you look in the Rav Shulchan Aruch, which again you'll find on page Yutes, and this Rav Shulchan Aruch goes on and on for pages and pages. We don't have time to go through the whole thing, but we'll point out a few highlights. And if you have page Yutes, he says that Shtiyas HaKos Ma'keves, that the Shtiyah from the Kos is absolutely critical, but he says, if it's a koshel bracha, then dai b'shtiyas acher, no one would question that any shtiyah of anyone would be sufficient. Afilu im tar mimenu l'tinok, if he gave it over to a tinok to drink. That's as far as koshel bracha. Sheyishtem mimenu eza adam Yisrael, Shehei Shtiyah Zuk Chashuva Hanolo. If he gets Hana, Nafilu Tinok Shel Ben Yomo. So here there's no question in my mind that the Rav Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Birchas Hamazon Kuf Sadi Seif Dalet is referring to a koshel bracha, and he's relying totally on Rashi in Masechta Eruvin, where in the case, as we said earlier, of the bris on Yom Kippur, we give the koshel bracha over to the tinok to drink. But then, when he gets to the
He has
next.
an interesting point about Molly Lugma of the Tinoik, which I don't know how you do that.
Did I miss that point? He requires Moli Lugma. Let's see what he says on the bottom here. So I don't know. This requires more investigation, but I was just halfway through a sentence. If you'll let me just complete my sentence, if you take a look at the continuation of the Rav Shulchan Aruch, and here we're looking on page Chaf, paragraph that starts V'yesh Omrim. He says, "Kol dover aton kos chutz mi kiddush lo hitzrichu lito mimenu ela mishum shelo yehei gnai lebirchas hayayin sheyomu shelo litzarach yabracha v'nireis kibracha levatol." And if you take a look in the footnote number Lamed Zayin, he surely, and we could have written this text on our own, he quotes Rashi and Eruvin Daf Memo Mid Beis. So here he clarifies exactly what he had said earlier about the fact that Shtias HaKos is not ma'akiv in a kosher bracha. It's the Birchas Bar Gofen, which is the Shira al Yayin, and that's critical. And the only reason we need that someone benefit from this kos is because otherwise the bracha seems like a bracha levatol. Then he gets to Kiddush. And in the same page, if you drop down a few paragraphs, he writes on Kiddush, he says there, it's not enough that the Tino drink from the wine. And he goes on to quote a Shita that the Makadish himself has to drink from the wine. Kimoli Lukmov, V'im Lav Lo Yotza. And that was the simple pshat in the Gemara Psachim. And that's the way the Gaonim paskin. It was only the Rashbam, if you remember, in Psachim, and that again, just to review, was back on page Zion, the first of the pages here. Avol toim echad mehem yotzu kula. Anyone could be toim. But he says that here we need shtias hayayin. And therefore, lo daiba meshe yitom atinok. It's not enough for a tinok to drink the wine. And he says in the next paragraph, again, I'm trying to highlight pages and pages just by focusing, honing in on certain words. He says, B'chol dover aton kos, is 4 lines up before the end of the page. She is sadru oso al birchas yayin. That there'll be siddur bracho on a kosher yayin. So the kosher yayin somehow transforms and upgrades all the brachos into shira through the birchas hayayin. It's unbelievable how the birchas hayayin triggers off such an impact on the other brachos. So let's say, for example, birchas hamazon, we have 4 brachos. But if you add a bar priya gafen, you successfully transform all those 4 brachos, upgrading them to the status of shira yayin. Or, for example, in bris milah, you have Asher Kiddush V'Yedid Mi Beten, in which we thank Hashem for the Kiddusha Rabbah, and we add the Bar Priya Gofen to convert that bracha of Kiddush Yedid Mi Beten to the status of Shira Yayin. And then he says that somebody will have to drink from the kos. Now, at this point, he makes a little bit of a switch in terms of the age of the katan, who we permit to drink from the kosher bracha. Until now, he said it was a yenuka, quoting the Rashi as it were in Masechta Eruvin in the case of a bris milah on Yom Kippur. But here, he says it's got to be a cotton she'igil lechinuch. And I was surprised that nobody commented on this, because it seems like he's switching his position. In the footnote, he says he's quoting here the tshuva, the Chacham Tzvi. So I'm not sure exactly whether or not he's quoting two different tshuvas here. Let's go back again to the previous page you test. Chaf Zayin. I don't know. It's hard to say. There's so many source material here on the bottom of the footnotes. Just go on and on and on. Oh, let's see if the Lakewood Yeshiva noticed this switch. Okay, so we're now on the bottom of Chaf. He says maybe Shitas Rashi be Erevin. That's back on Daf, on the previous on page Yud in Rashi and Erevin. Sheikar takonoi solavarach birkas hayayin mishum shu bechlal shir al yayin. So the kiyum of the mitzvah of shir al yayin is through the bari pri hagafim. Hateima, you've already fulfilled the mitzvah of shir al yayin. Hurak mishum gnai. What about Kiddush? Avol nokat keshitas hagaonim lechalik ben Kiddush ala kos l'shar birchas brachos ala kos. So that the Rav Shulchan Aruch is going to accept, at least l'chatchila, the chumrah of the gaonim, but when it comes to Kiddush. And that chumrah requires that the Mekadesh himself drink from the yayin kimoli lugma. So again, he doesn't develop it further here in the footnote, but obviously in Kiddush, we have a mitzvah zachrei al yayin, and that generates a chiyuv kos with shtiyas hakos, and therefore, the mitzvah itself is made up of shtiyah. Who's going to do the shtiyah if not the Mekadesh? And the Gaonim made it so critical that according to the Gaonim, let's say Nishpach HaKos, after he recited Kiddush, you weren't Yotzei the mitzvah of Kiddush. We could accept the middle of the road Shita that we discussed, which was the Rashbam Shita, that anyone who's Yotzei, that bracha of Kiddush, he will now be able to serve as the agent on behalf of all the Mesubin who are being Yotzei the mitzvah of Kiddush to drink from the kos. We'll identify one person, we'll get one volunteer who will drink Kimole Lugmav from the Koshel Kiddush, and we don't have to go as far as the Gaonim is concerned to guarantee that the Mekadesh fulfill the entire mitzvah single-handedly, both the brachos and the shtiyah. We can split it. We can have the Mekadesh fulfill one part of the mitzvah, namely the brachos, and one of the Mesubin at the table will fulfill the other part of the critical part of the mitzvah, namely the shtiyah sakos, drinking a moli lugma. And now he quotes the Chasam Tzvi. That's what we saw in the footnote. Shalidas Rashi shebirchas bar pe'agavim b'chal ha'bracha shenitkanu al hakos mishum shir al hayayin imkein ha'mavarach birkas hamazon al hakos chayav levarach am birkas bari pe'agavim v'yefshel litein li'achar levarach. Let me just go over that one more time. Shitas Chacham Tzvi. He also got stuck at the same point that we got stuck. Shaladas Rashi Shabirchas Bari Pigam fine. Shir El Yain Im Avarach Birkas Hamozan Al Hakos. Okay. You know, when I think about it a second time, it sounds to me like the Chacham Tzvi is saying something which is obvious. It's Pshita Muvan Meila. Because again, if the whole purpose of the Bracha Al Hakos is that through the Bori Pri Hagafen, we upgrade and transform the Birchas HaMazon, all those 4 brachos, into Shir Alayayin, then obviously we want the Mevarech, who's reciting the brachos on the Mazon, to be the Mevarech Borei Pri HaGofen, so that we integrate the Borei Pri HaGofen together with the Birchas HaMazon to form an entity of Shir Alayayin. Okay. Now we get to the Mishnah Berurah. This is on page Chaf Beis. Now, you'll take a look in the Mechaber Reish Ayin Aleph. Im lo tama makadosh v'tama echad min ha-mesubim k'mali mulkov yotza. Okay, so he's accepting the shita that we started with in this whole Kuntris, the Rashbam, and many other Rishonim against the Gaonim, that it's not necessary for the Makadesh himself to drink from the wine. Fine. But if you'll notice, who's drinking from the wine? It's Echad Min HaMesubim. Take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and it's Sivkaton Tes Samach Tes. He says, Kevan HaMesubim Shamu Mitchilas HaBracha.
I can't.
What, you have it?
Which page are you?
I'm sorry, we're on page Chaf Beis. I'm sorry, I accidentally, I didn't make
looks like it's Chaf Dalet. No, you said Chaf Beis, but it looks like Chaf Dalet for us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. You have a more upgraded version. I should have gone through it. David sent me your upgraded version. I should have made the combinations. Anyway, see if you could find a page that
I have it now. I have it now.
In the Mishnah Berurah. So what number is it? Chaf Dalet, you say?
Chaf Dalet, yeah.
All right, I'll make a note that this is Chaf Dalet. So the Mishnah Berurah says the Kemen Sham Mesubim Shamu Mitchilas Es HaBracha V'hu Kiven Alem Lo Tzion Mahaniti Masam Lekula. And basically what he's saying is that the Te'ima of anyone who's part of the Kiddush, and he's mitztarif to the Kiddush because the Makadesh had him in mind, he had in mind to be Yotze from the Bracha of the Makadesh, then he's authorized to do the Shtia on behalf of everyone else. Avalim Shasa Acher. Now we have a fremd dimension, something from the outside. Shalo Kiven Allah Bebracha. No one included him in the bracha. Maybe he himself doesn't include himself in the bracha. V'oso acher birech michadash. Let's say he makes his own bracha. He doesn't want to be yotze with the bracha of the mekadesh. Mashma shein yotzim b'ti masa. V'dino kilu nishpach hakos. So that it's critical that one of the Mesubim who links up to the Makadesh's bracha will drink from the kos. It's not the Gaonim that require that the Makadesh himself drink from the kos. But on the other hand, we're not going as far as to say that anyone from anywhere could be invited to drink from the kos, even though he wasn't part of this bracha itself. Now, he mentions at the end, Dino Ki'ilu Nishpach HaKos. Now, in the case of Nishpach HaKos, we're going to have to bring another kos and recite another Borei Pri HaGofen in order for the Mesubim to be Yotzei, the mitzvah of Kiddush. Again, it doesn't matter which one of those Mesubim will drink from the kos, but one of them has to drink from the kos. And in the next page, which I assume is page Chaf Hey, we have the Bach. Do you have the Bach?
Yeah, it's Chaf Vav.
Chaf Vav. Oh, wow. So I don't know what you have on page Chaf Hey.
I have the Mishnah Berurah, another page of the Mishnah Berurah.
Oh, you have 2 pages of the Mishnah Berurah or only one?
Two pages.
Oh, all right. So I'm going to have to see what you have on that second page. Okay, fine. Nire, says the Bach, da gaonim digdaku mi lishna de Rav Huna. Simple pshat, straightforward translation of the words of Rav Huna in the Gemara Pesachim Kuf Zayin, which we saw in Amud Zayin. And he says the following: Omar, says Rav Huna, Hamakadesh v'tam alo lugma of Yotza. Hamakadesh v'tam. He should have shifted the emphasis to the cost. That's got to be a tema from the cost. No, he says, I'm a Kaddish Sarch Sheyitom. Mashma, the Tom Echad Min Mesubin. It's not enough that one of the Mesubim drink from the cost. Well, Hashda the Yomar Makadesh. If he would have said that the cost requires Shtia, it would be Echad Min Mesubim. But instead he says, that Hamakadesh v'tam, requiring that the Makadesh himself drink from the kos. And by the way, just halach l'maisa, I'm not your posek, but I would say that it is a good idea, based on everything that we covered, that the Makadesh drink moli lugma. I'm not saying b'di'evad you weren't yotze, but I think l'chatchila we should have enough respect for the Gaonim and for the Bach and the simple reading of the Gemara and Psachim to require lechatchila that the Makadesh drink voli lugma from the kos. Again, I wouldn't don't have to make a whole stinkeroo about it, but that should be the way we should go. Ubeperek chalon, now he quotes the Gemara in Eruvin. Nami amri sabi de pumpadisa Makadesh and tom voli lugma v'yotzav him lav lo yotzav. Alma, we see that Makadesh atzmo tzorch sheyitom. V'lo achim. V'rosh svirle. Okay, the Rosh is against the Gaonim. He's like the Rashbam. The lav daf kedoken hamakadesh. Ashkan perkol ram. El denoken hamakadesh mishum dilachat chila. Oh, look at that. Dilachat chila vadei toim hamakadesh. He's saying, the Bach is saying it even in the Rosh. And the Rashbam, they say also, all those we showed him who reject the Gaonim and maintain that it's enough that any one of the Mesubim drink a moli lugmav, nevertheless, they agree, Vadai toem hamakadosh. Avol b'di'evet yotza mitimas acher. And in the note here from the Lakewood Yeshiva, he writes, no keit la'alocha ka'gaonim shamakadosh bi'atzmo tzorch yitom. So that's what we have. Now on the next couple of pages, I'm afraid to quote a page. You'll tell me where you have the Tshuvas Haran. So I'm going to guess that it'll probably...
Roberta, can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
But what's not completely clear is if somebody who's being yaitza with the Kiddush Mamash, if he's the one who's going to drink it, is that also like when we say Makadish is lechatchila tzarech litayim? Because earlier they said that it wouldn't work if somebody came sort of who was not yaitza with the Kiddush and just made a bar priyagofen and drank the kos. But somebody who's literally being yaitza with this Kiddush, would that not be enough of that he's part of that mitzvah for him to be the one who's tayim?
Not according to the Gaonim. That's true according to the Rosh and the Rashbam, who don't take the Gemara literally, that a Makadish tzorch sheyitom. They understood it in a more broad sort of fashion, that the language of Makadesh tolerates anyone who's Yotze with Kiddush. But if you take the Gaonim Shita literally, and the way we explain the Gaonim is because the Maisa Kiddush requires Shtia, then you have done an incomplete Maisa Shtia. So it's a Maisa Mitzvah. So it's a very strange thing from the Gaonim's perspective to try to imagine that you take a Maisa Mitzvah and you split it into two. Well, I'm going to do part of the mitzvah, you're going to do the other part of the mitzvah. and we're going to be mitzarif together. And now the Bach is throwing another light on it. He's saying that even according to those who allow and qualify the Kiddush when somebody else drinks it, well, you know what? You're still splitting up the mitzvah into two parts. It's not really the ideal situation. And we're going to take the Makadesh in a broader sense to mean anyone who's Yotze in Kiddush, but for sure, the simple, straightforward interpretation of the Gemara is the way to go. I really am eager to start the next kuntrus. I just want to finish up with the Tshuva Saran over here. And again, I'm afraid to announce the page. I'm guessing that it's on page Chav Zayin, but maybe you have more pages than I have here. Od Kosavta, Moel Shemol Bebeis HaKnesses, Ubirech Ala Kos Bori Pri HaGofen, Vasher Kiddush Yedid Mi Beten, Vehitim L'Tinok HaNimol Ben Shmones Yomim Tzorch Sheyitom HaMoel O HaTinok Shegiel L'Chinuch Kidei Shlo Tei Bracha Levatola, O Shenomar Shetimos HaTinok HaNimol Potroso Kedamir Bial. So this issue here, which is being written to the Rosh as a question, is really the issue that we addressed in the Rav Shulchan Aruch, footnote quoting the Chacham Tzvi, as to whether or not in Beracha Ala Kos, for example, in Milah, we have to guarantee that if the child is going to drink from the kos, he's got to be Higil Achinu. And if you recall, at the end of the day, the Rav Shulchan Aruch required that the child be Higil Achinu. And you've seen this at every bris. I would ask for a confirmation from Murray Shore if he was here. He lives not far from here in Yerushalayim. But anyway, so at the bris, what you're going to have to see is that the Mevarech Ala Kos is going to drink from the kos as well. Have you seen it? And you might call it a brisker chumrah, because Mikar Adin, it seems that it's enough to give some of the wine to the Tino. But this is based on, number one, the Chacham Tzvi that we saw before in the Rav Shulchan Aruch, but number two, it's also based on this Tshuva Saran. And he says the following. And now I'm moving over to the next page, because I'm just trying to highlight the important part. He says, he says that you can make a Berchas Hanenim on behalf of a Katan. You don't have to be super pious about that. And he quotes the Gemara, Rosh Hashanah, Pores Adam Lebanov Lebeisa Ketanim V'Chulev V'Chitema Dahasam Dafka B'Ketanim Shegil Chinuch. So you'll argue that the Gemara there, who allows you to make a bracha with Shemu Malchus on behalf of Katan, that's only in a case of a Katan Negil Chinuch. So the mitzvah of Chinuch per se permits, or we would say in sophisticated languages, matir, the bracha with a shame. Because, we don't make a bracha. Stam. We don't cheapen a bracha. There's an isur of lahotzi bracha levatola mipiv, which might even be a lav of yiras Hashem. We have to have yira for the Shem Hashem. So we'll overlook that for the sake of chinuch. V'kevan shekain, and if that's the logic and that's the interpretation, that to justify the bracha we need a katan shegil chinuch pshitalan the eno rashoy levarach hamotziv lebirchas bori pri hagofen b'shvil tinok shel ben shmona yamin. If he's not going to drink from the kos of the kid of the milah, of the bris milah, and he's going to only give it to the katan who's ben shmona yamim, and he's not higil lechinuch, then that doesn't justify the bracha. And if we're worried about the gnayu lebracha, because the bracha was not justified by the hana that followed it, then we have a problem if we just simply give the kos shel mila to the Yanuka. He says, "Afilu hachi ikol meimer de hacha shiny. She birchas ha-mitzvah she'asa." Wow, this is fascinating. See, we never had the chutzpah to go one step further, one giant step further, and define Borei Pri HaGofen as a birchas ha-mitzvah, even in a kosher bracha. Again, we were willing to do that in Kiddush. And we integrated the Borei Pri HaGofen together with the bracha of Kiddush to form one entity of a birchas ha-mitzvah, as we saw in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah Chav Tes. But we never were willing to take one giant step further and say that even in a kosher bracha, the Borei Pri HaGofen becomes elevated to the status of a birchas ha-mitzvah, which means that the bracha is justified even without hana at all. So that, call it a birchas ha-nenim, but it's also a birchas ha-mitzvah, and the status of the bracha of Borei Pri HaGofen as a birchas ha-mitzvah could justify, even if you're only giving the yayin to the tinot ben shmona yomim. Let's read it again. He says, "Afilu achi ikol meimar the hacha shiny she birchas ha-mitzvah she'asa." I don't know what he says here in the footnote. Ratzalomar hamila. He's saying that the Borei Pri HaGofen, together with the mitzvah of Mila, becomes a Berachas HaMitzvah. Imagine, you're making Asher, Baruch to Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Borei Pri HaGofen, on the mitzvah of Mila. I mean, where did we ever find that a Berachas HaNenim becomes a Berachas HaMitzvah on Mila? Vehi Berachas Asher Kiddush. It's integrated together with the Birchas Asher Kiddush. We came Tina Satina Kanimo Sagi. The Kavan Shepores Bishvil Atino. Shenischai Bechino Kolshke Bishvil Zeshi Kilchi Mitzvizu. Okay, I don't understand this Kolshke of the Ran. I don't know if I'll live enough years to ever understand this Kolshke of the Ran. But whatever it is, let's, for the time being, leave out the Kolshke. But basically what he's saying is that you can justify the brachas of birchas ha-mitzvah if a katan shegil lechinuch would drink from the kos, and likewise if the yanuka drinks from the kos. I mean, this throws a whole different spin on the sugya in Erevin about birchas habris, in the case of Yom Kippur, where we give the kos and the yayin over to the tinok to drink it. V'nira od, mashma, l'chora mashma mirashi, beperek bakol marovim, gabi ahid l'tami l'yinuka, shem yivarech v'lo yitom lo hu v'lo acher, she'em v'zeh isa shel bracha v'atola, el gnayu l'kos shel bracha shel tamidu, v'kein sagi lon v'te'ima kol dehu, man dahav, whoever it is. Afilu tinok ben shmona yom. So I'm going to stop here, and we take out the next kuntras. So this kuntras, which is the fourth and the last in our series on Kiddush, and then you'll decide if you want to go on to the Lechem Mishnah, and then from there to Seudah Shabbos and to Tosefah Shabbos. That's up to you. But this is the last in the series on Kiddush.
Do we have that one?
I'm pretty sure you do. Kiddusha Rabbah, it's called. David, do we have it? Just let me not...
I'm not sure.
Oh.
Because you're the thing I want to discuss that. All right.
All right, so look,
In
I'm just going to give a 15-minute introduction, and you don't have to see all the source material inside. to this concept called Kiddusha Rabbah. The Gemara in Masechta Psachim, back to our Psachim Kuvav, calls Kiddush by day Kiddusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush. The paradox is that Kiddusha Rabbah consists of one bracha, and that bracha ostensibly has nothing to do with Kiddush. It's Borei Pri Hagafen. And this entire Kuntres, which has in it 30 some odd pages, is dedicated to try to make some sense out of this concept, this mitzvah called Kiddusha Rabbah, Kiddush by day. So I'm just going to make a few comments from milamala, as we say here in Hebrew, just from in Luftarein, not without getting into the real, getting down into the mud, with the real nitty-gritty nuances of issues here. First of all, the Gemara in Psachim derives Kiddush by day from a pasuk in Chumash. It says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. And the Gemara has a brisa that Yachal, I might think, that you could be Yotzi at night, Talmud Lomer Yom. So point number one in our discussion is how to understand the Gemara Psachim. Does the Gemara Psachim think that the Iker Kiddush is during the day? Kemoshe Kosov, as the pasuk says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Question number two. How could Borei Pri Hagafen serve as a Kiddush without mentioning Shabbos at all? And that leads us to question number three, which, as I mentioned earlier, why does the Gemara call it Kiddusha Rabbah? Question number four. Do we require yayin? And here I get into some politically, how long can you tread water kind of questions, because, I come from a Hasidic background, so Kiddush on Schnapps was a given, that was Dover Pasha. But trust me, it's not Pasha at all. The next issue is going to be who drinks from the yayin. And here we're going to open up to a whole new possibility that we didn't have until now. We suggested that Kiddush ala yayin, zachrei ala yayin requires shtia. But listen how far we're going to go with regard to Kiddusha Rabbah on Shabbos day. Every single person has to drink Kimole Lugmav, bring out the bottles. You know what I mean? Your average Kiddush, I spent a lot of time in Netanya. I don't know if I told you this. So in the McDonald shul, it's called, because the name of the street is McDonald, he was an ambassador to Israel that was very pro-Jewish. So they named the street after him, McDonald. So the shul has a name. It's called Beit Knesset Hadash because it's only 60 years old. But anyway, so the people call it McDonald shul. So they have a Kiddush there for over 100 people. Again, it's not Teaneck. Don't get me wrong. And imagine how many bottles of wine you would need for each Kiddush on Shabbos if you assume that Kiddusha Rabbah requires that everyone drink a Moli Lugmav of Yayin. So that's an amazing part of this whole discussion. Next question. You may recall when we started our discussion of Kiddush, I don't remember how long ago that was, with the first Kuntres, we had a whole school of Rishonim that interpreted Kiddush Doraisa, not the way the Rambam interprets it, as Kiddush Hayom, meaning to sanctify the day itself. Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. And we have to be Mekadesh the day. In fact, some of the Rishonim go as far as to say that it's not enough that the Kiddusha Shabbos is Kviya V'Kaimi, it's a given and it flows down from from the heavens every seventh day of the week for all eternity, but that we have to be Mekadesh it. And it's similar to Kiddush HaChodesh, which you read about this last Shabbos. We have to be Mekadesh the Shabbos. And there are Rishonim who compare it to Bechar, and apparently the two mitzvahs in Bechar. There's a Kiddusha Bechar that's Mileda. Automatically, once the Bechar is Peter Rechem, he's Kadosh B'Kedushas Bechar, and then there's on top to boot, there's a mitzvah to Mekadesh the Bechar. And the same thing applies in Shabbos. This might be the Shittas Ramban, might be the Tosas al Torah, Ziknei Tosas al Torah, and other Rishonim. And that was all in the first countries. If that be the case, then what's Kiddush by day? It makes no sense. When you're Mekadesh the Shabbos, you're Mekadesh the Shabbos b'knisaso. You sanctify the Shabbos when it begins. And that Kiddush will be chal for the entire 24 hours of Shabbos. And Rabbosai, we attempted to come to a conclusion. I think my Rebbe would give me a fraskin ponim, that there are two Kiddushos HaShabbos within a 24-hour period. There's Kedushas HaLaila and there's Kedushas HaYom. And the 24 hours of Shabbos should be split down the middle between Laila and Yom. And the mitzvah of Kiddush B'Laila is not sufficient to cover the entire 24-hour period, but the Yom itself is mechayev a whole new Kiddush. And Rabbosai, one of the issues that we're going to cover here in Mirz Hashem, which always bothered me, is what happens to the wife for Kiddusha Rabbah. My wife wakes up on Shabbos morning. Should I tell her to make Kiddush? She wants to have a coffee and a piece of cake. All right, there's a whole issue about davening first. So let's say we tell her daven, or at least say Moda'ani, say Berachas HaShachar, biyotze at least the minimum of Tefillah Doraisa, and that's enough. Now she wants to eat. That's all right. She doesn't have to wait 3 hours till I get home from shul. Should she make Kiddush? And for this, we're going to see a tshuva from Moshe Feinstein in Mirz Hashem, that she should not make Kiddush until the husband comes home from shul. Tell her. And one of the things I want to discuss with you is, was that tshuva of Moshe Feinstein accepted l'halacha l'maisa? Very widespread, famous tshuva of Moshe, that the women should be waiting for their husbands. And I'm not sure if it's halacha in Kiddush, or if it's halacha in Shalom Bayis. Because in the tshuva, Moshe quotes halacha that Isha mishubedes l'bayla, not a very popular topic to speak about in contemporary life, even in Lakewood. And then I want to discuss with you another issue that comes up. With regard to Kiddush by day, Kiddusha Rabbah, does it have to be b'makom Seuda? And if it does have to be b'makom Seuda, what's its relationship to Seuda? And if it has a relationship to the Seuda, then is it enough to just drink Moli Lugmav? Period. Do I have to eat a piece of cake? And that's enough? Do I have to be Koveh Seuda? And what happens if I make Kiddush in one place and I come home to another place? Do I have to set up a new Kiddush? B'makom Seuda, because the first Makom Seuda is not the second Makom Seuda. Then I'm going to ask you another mind-boggling question, and you're going to laugh me out of the ballpark. Or I guess you'd say in kind of the rink. And that is, do I have to recite Kiddush a third time on Shabbos? before Seudah Shlishit, which means that every single Seudah requires its own Kiddush. And in this context, we're going to have to see the Rambam, and there are different Gersos in the Rambam, and there are different interpretations of the Rambam, the Beis Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch, and we're going to come to the conclusion, Rabbosai, that it's quite possible that according to some interpretations of the Rambam, believe it or not, every Seudah, including Seudah Shlishis, requires its own Kiddush. And in that sense, Kiddusha Rabbah makes it into the most important dimension of Kiddush that we can discuss. So, B'li Neder, David will help me out here and he'll get you this fourth Choveret. I think he has it. I hope he has it. I'm praying he has it. Maybe Yudi has it. I don't know. But it's called Kiddusha Rabbah. And I think it'll take us at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, I don't know. And it'll complete our study of Kiddush. After that, you'll have to take my exam. And if you pass, I'll give you smicha in Hilchas Kiddush. And then you'll have to, when you think already in advance now, where do we go from here? Do we want to continue in Hilchas Shabbos? Right now, in my possession, I have Kuntresim from the Lakewood Yeshiva on 2 other aspects of Shabbos. Number 1, on Lechem Mishnah and Suda Shabbos. And number 2, on Tosefes Shabbos. Tosefes B'Knisasa, Tosefes B'Yitziasa. So I don't want to impose myself on you, but you know, my Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik, used to always say at the end of the year, what Masechta do you want to learn next year? And then we would take a vote. And we would tell the Rav we wanted to learn Masechta X. One thing I could promise you, he would not teach Masechta X. All right. So I wish refuah shlema to myself and Banim Ubnei Banim and all of Gans Klal Yisrael and so on. So thank you so much.
Shalom.
Thank you, Rav.
Thank you.
First